you need to you shift from selfish to selfless. You've got to put yourself last as a leader, whereas a sales rep is fundamentally, paid to be selfish. So that's the first, the mindset thing. Um, the second is, all the philosophy similar to the first. Leaders eat last. I always say, the leader, you've got to be first into battle and last in retreat, and it's tough because you've got to lead by example. And the third is, first of all, you'll probably make less money than you did as an individual contributor. But more to the point, if you're going to be successful, you've got to hire people who are really, really good. And managing really good people is challenging.
Good morning, Martin. Welcome to the show. If I can ask you to start by introducing yourself and your current role, please.
Paul, good morning. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. My name's Martin Mackay. I'm currently the Chief Revenue Officer for Versa Networks.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So what does Chief Revenue Officer mean? CRO is quite a relatively new role name.
Relatively, perhaps. CRO, I'm responsible for the entire field operations. So managing the sales team, pre-sales team, channels, everything that happens in the field comes under my purview. Obviously, customer relationships, etc. So ultimately, all revenue, be it new or renewal, flows through me, I guess. Although I have an extremely competent and efficient team who really do all the work.
Excellent. So the burden of success of the company falls on your shoulders, right?
Yeah, ultimately, that seems to be how things are reflected when we have a board meeting, because of the 2.5 hours, probably at least 2 hours is spent talking to me.
Wow. Well, there you go. So what do Versa Networks do?
We are in the SASE space. So we started as a secure SD-WAN vendor, and in the last 2 or 3 years, we've expanded our portfolio to include all of the security products. So we're a vendor in the secure access service edge space, and we've got an incredible roster of blue chip customers. We've got amazing technology, and we're expanding very fast.
Excellent. So when I look through your LinkedIn profile and look at the roles you've done, I can't see any junior role you've ever done. You've always done a senior role, and obviously lots of executive roles. So is that something you always aspired to, or is it just something you've naturally moved into?
That's a really interesting question, Paul. I did do junior roles like everyone else.
You just didn't put them on LinkedIn.
Well, definitely 1989 is there, I think. And I mean, there are, I actually started my career, I hate to say this, 34 years ago. So there's quite a lot to put on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I think I got bored and I just said a whole previous series of roles in Anderson Consulting and Dun & Bradstreet Software, etc. But I guess for me, my career really started in 1996, 7 years in with PeopleSoft, which was an 8-year run under both Dave Duffield and Craig Conway. And then, I did the early stage thing with as a VC for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And, in terms of career management, I give myself, not particularly high marks in that I've taken on some brilliant roles with amazing companies where I've learned a lot and have, thanks to working with great people, have achieved a lot. Not least what you and I did together at Proofpoint is something I think we can both be proud of.
Yeah.
But I've also taken on, some more challenging roles, particularly in the early stage world, where, I was chief executive of 4 companies in my time, private equity or venture capital backed companies, which were, probably knew less success than perhaps in some of the other opportunities that I've had. So, have I really planned my career? I don't think so.
Okay.
I would say it's been more happenstance, if I'm very honest.
Okay. What did you prefer? What do you think you're more suited to in terms of the early stage startup, minimal staff, or some of the big beasts that you've managed as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. A question I ask myself all the time. I think ultimately I'm more of a big platform guy. Actually,
Okay.
my whole intention with Versa Networks is to try to turn it into that big platform.
Yeah.
But I think, again, if you look at what I did at Proofpoint at CA, and then previously perhaps at VeriSign, I was leading fairly big teams, and working with great leaders like yourself, to build pretty robust, large business. And I think ultimately, having done the very early stage stuff, having done the VC stuff, having done the big platform stuff, I think I'm probably ultimately a big platform guy. As I say, Versa, we're just in that process of trying to transition towards being that major player.
Excellent. So I want to talk about early career or even education. So you didn't do a business degree, if I recall right. I seem to remember you did languages. Am I
did
right?
Languages. Yeah, if you go back to the mid '80s, I read World Languages at Oxford, and in fact, I have maintained those. So I still speak fluent French and Spanish, and write them as well, and that's been very useful over the years. But if you go back to the late '80s, actually, the notion of a career in technology, or the notion of doing a business degree or a technical degree, was very early stage. I have one very close friend in the industry who's had an amazing career, is a fantastic guy. He was, I think, in the first cohort of computer science graduates in Bristol in 1989, and we started at Anderson Consulting, as it was more or less at the same time. But quite frankly, Anderson Consulting said, we don't care what you've studied. It's really, can you apply some of the skills that you learned in your academic world to the business and technology world? So I joined Anderson Consulting without really knowing what I was doing. It just seemed like an interesting career, as 2 or 3 other people that had decided to go down the same route.
But there must be a benefit speaking foreign languages, though, because typically in the UK, that's not our strong point, right?
Yeah, that indubitably has helped. And I still speak. I work in French. I work in Spanish very regularly. We have a Latin American business, so I speak Spanish to Latin American customers and partners. Obviously, not Brazil, that's Portuguese. But I'm in France pretty frequently and speaking French. And I think it surprises people a little, where you've got, as you say, a Brit who can turn up, and it's not just, saying bonjour, comment allez-vous. It really is, I can, as I say, to the extent that I can lead and sell in English, I can lead and sell in French and Spanish just as effectively.
That's impressive. It's impressive. Obviously, English is the international language of business, but it does make a massive difference. And I recall being on meetings with you and seeing you work in multiple languages, and it's always very impressive. So, degree in foreign languages. What did you want to grow up to be? What did you want to do after that?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I came from quite an academic family.
Okay.
And none of my relations had any career in business at all. Okay. So I was driven by one thing, which was I wasn't going to be an academic. I wasn't going to teach or become ordained. That was not in my in my DNA. And so I wanted a career in business. I wanted to be the first one in the family who was going to be the successful business leader. And not for me to say whether I've been successful or not, but I certainly am the only one in the immediate family who went down that path.
So I'm wondering what inside you decided or determined to do that, because it would have been much easier to do what your close family had done.
Yeah, and that's very simple. That was just, I hate to say it, a deep desire to be different from anything that I experienced in the close family. And so, aged 18, I took myself to New Zealand for the best part of 2 years, working as a house tutor at a school there. And people asked me, why did you go to New Zealand? And I said, well, that was the furthest geographical point from where I was. So I guess I was always going to be looking to do something different from the upbringing that I'd had.
Okay. So interesting you mentioned New Zealand there. So I know you spent some time on that side of the world. So not a lot of people will. Well, some people will relocate in the same country, but not to a different continent. So how did that benefit you? Think Do you think in your career in working on another continent?
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky. I think I've lived in 5 different countries for at least a year: New Zealand, Mexico, France, Singapore, and obviously the UK. I think it's a mindset. I've always wanted to explore new cultures, look at new opportunities. I, I like to think of myself as a little bit of a cultural chameleon. I think the business challenges that we face, whether you're in Japan, France, India, or the UK, are broadly the same. But how business is done is extremely different.
Yeah, yeah,
So the value proposition of whatever you're selling may be pretty much equate to the same thing, but how you sell it has to be very different. How you approach has to be very different. And so I've always been driven by the notion of an international career. I've been lucky enough to, as I say, to live in a number of different countries and to work in a lot, and to try to be as effective as I can as a leader in multiple cultures. And so I think that mindset, if you like, started when I was 18, which now, let's face it, is a couple of years ago. And I've sort of maintained it over the intervening years. So I still get excited by engaging with um, you know people from different countries. I recently, in the last 3 weeks, I went to Taiwan for the first time in my life, and that was fascinating because clearly you've got an extremely successful economy, extremely driven people, but they're living in the shadow of Big Brother, and that Big Brother is not necessarily friendly. So that was fascinating in itself. Um, and I still travel a lot. Yesterday I got back from the US after 2 weeks there. So I think that's something that I will continue to do for as long as I'm on the mortal coil, or as it were. It's just it's that desire to experience new cultures, and to engage in business in an international context. I think that's a big part of who I am.
I think it's important to understand that business is not conducted the same in different regions, different countries, and obviously working for North American firms, that's always not been blatantly clear or understood. But
How diplomatically put.
very true. So look, so you always seem to be leading a sales team. So what is it? Is it the sales? What is it about sales that you love and you continue to do?
Yeah, I think there are three things. Ultimately, sales is at the forefront of any company. As I
Yeah.
like to say, selling software solves a lot of problems. You've heard my saying that before.
I've
If you
used that
make
many times since you said that to me. I've used it lots of times.
if you're making the number, well, someone who, if he wasn't exactly a mentor, he was someone I learned a huge amount from, Craig Conroy, and he was the transformational CEO of PeopleSoft back in the 1990s. He said to me, Martin, a leader only has two problems: not enough orders and every other problem. So the first thing is you are right at the forefront of the success of the company, and you've got to enjoy that responsibility. Secondly, by being at the forefront, you are you're engaging with customers, you're engaging with partners. You are representing the company, and
Yeah.
you're trying to drive that growth. You've got a very external perspective then on life. So that's the most exciting thing, I think. And then the third element to it, I guess, particularly in the technology industry, that it can be, provided you're successful, quite lucrative.
Yeah.
So that always helps. But I think that it's just fun, ultimately, to be the sales leader. You're working typically with uh, people who are very energetic, driven, and they can be difficult to lead, as you know. But they're typically it's sort of the exciting part of business, if you like, and that's not to denigrate in any shape or form some fantastic colleagues who do many other functions. It's just I think it fits a certain mindset, if you like.
So I love the analogies and the phrases you come out with. I've quoted you already on another episode of the podcast, or this podcast. So thank you for that, and keep them coming.
Yeah,
You mentioned about leading sales teams and how difficult they can be. What would those salespeople say about you in terms of what sort of leader is Martin?
that's really interesting. I would like to think um, they would say three things that uh, I bring process and discipline. They might not like that, but they would say that. I think they'd also say, okay, Martin's pretty transparent and honest. And then the third thing, I flatter myself a little, but I think they would say, we are happy to bring Martin into our accounts. And I think that's the most important thing as a leader. Because ultimately it's not about me, but it's about using my title to get higher into the organization to try and unblock a deal. And I think that's probably the key value for a field leader, which will your team bring you into an account because they trust you, not to screw up the deal, not to screw up the relationship, or will they try to keep you at arm's length? And I think that's probably the thing that I value most. And I've been lucky enough, I guess, over the years for people to say, yeah, we trust Martin, we'll bring him in, he's going to, in some shape or form, add value to this deal and help us close it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think so. I've heard this before. In my opinion, building trust and credibility with your sales team is so important, because you need them to bring you into deals to help them, like you just said. So, and actually gaining that credibility can be quite tough, especially as a new leader.
Yeah, for sure. I remember in Singapore when I ran the CA Technologies business there, we had a fantastic rep who looked after the four major banks. And if you know the Singapore market, basically you do 70% of your number through the four major banks.
Okay.
Irrespective of the technology that you're selling. They are the four customers that spend money on technology consistently. And we had the rep there. She was brilliant. She's a friend now. But she was also very cautious as to who she would allow into her accounts. She was very protective.
Yeah.
And I guess I passed the litmus test, as it were. And so that's always something that I recall. The very best salespeople, and I've been lucky enough to work with some fantastic ones, they will bring you into a deal if they think you can help. And if they think you're just not going to represent the company effectively, then however much you ask, you're just not going to be brought in.
So we've talked about your successes and stuff and what sort of leader you are, but what are you not so good at, Martin?
That's a great question. I actually spin that round to you, since you and I work together. What do you think?
That's cheating. You can't do that. No. Answer a question with a question. Yeah, nice. I like your style.
What am I not so good at? I guess first of all, I tend to be a generalist from a technology point of view. I probably focus more on security in the last 10 years of my career than anything else. But I'm not necessarily a deep technologist, and I think more and more you need to be a deep technologist. I'm certainly not very good at political games. I'm not very good at not speaking my mind. I try to do it politely. But
I concur.
Yeah, but you know, I can upset people. You know I'm an extreme pragmatist, and by that definition, I set a lot of store by action. And if you're an extreme pragmatist, as I am, you can sometimes behave like a bull in a china shop, and it's good to take a step back and be a little bit more process driven and logical in your decision making. So I try to do that as well. But I'd far rather make a decision and find that it's wrong and change it than really just procrastinate. You know, I have another of the my favorite sayings is, I need to be successful, not right. So when it comes to difficult decisions, I tend not to have a huge ego. I'm trying to do the right thing for the business. If it's proven to be the bad decision, I've got no problem in changing it. So I guess there are a couple of things that I probably should improve on for sure.
So let's skip work for a little bit. Let's talk about the guitars behind you. So how's the guitar playing going?
Well, again, you and I had the fun of being in a band together, so you know that it could do with some improvement. Um, but I've got to say, since that time, and I still talk really fondly about that, and for the audience listening, just a brief anecdote. Um, Paul and I were two members of a five-man band at Proof Point, and we played together for about 15 months during lockdown. Every Monday during lockdown,
Yeah.
for 2 hours, we'd rehearse. And we'd rehearse with the lead singer sort of keeping us in time. And in fact, how Zoom worked with latency, etc. That was, we couldn't really hear anyone else playing. You
No.
could just hear the lead singer singing. And so when we got into the studio, we were actually quite good because we played this set of 15 or so songs over and over again. So look, the thing that I love about playing the guitar is we'll do crazy amounts of Zoom. We're all working 12 plus hours a day. I love taking 10 minutes out of the day and just picking it up and playing, whatever the song might be, Teenage Kicks or Rock and
Yeah.
Roll Star, etc. And then I am just for those 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm just transported, and that's all I think about. It becomes sort of a mental refresh as well.
Yeah.
So
I,
it's my standard, but it's progressing reasonably well. My wife is kind enough to say that I've improved over the last couple of years.
so we've got to give the background on it as well as to why there was a band. So we went to a sales kickoff, which I can't remember whether it was the Vegas one. It was the one in
Salt Lake City, I think.
it was Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And obviously we'd had a couple of beers or whatever, and then was talking about music and stuff. And then I think I crashed the conversation, and you were looking for a drummer, and I said, "Oh, my daughter's got a set of drums. Paul, you're the drummer." I'd never played drums in my entire life. I'd like to think I have a little bit of rhythm. Anyway, several hours and thousands of pounds later in drum lessons, I have an electronic drum kit next to me. I have an acoustic drum kit in the house. I still love bashing it out. And that time during COVID was such a nice getaway from spending 10 hours a day on Zoom meetings. It was such a great escape. So thank you for that. And I'm glad you still play. I'm glad you still play.
Totally, and I'm glad you are too. And we should try and form one. We should try and get the band back together, as they say.
We should do for one time only. Why not?
Yeah,
Why
it would
not?
be fun. Actually, I might take that on as a project.
That would be good fun. That would be good fun. So other things outside of work that you enjoy, cricket and Reading Football Club. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, cricket, of course. I mean, we are
course.
half an hour away as we speak from day 4 of the first Ashes Test.
Yeah.
And my style of writing a message every week to my team, 2 minutes and a cup of coffee, a title I stole famously from a previous
I'd
book.
forgotten all about 2 minutes and a cup of
Well, let me
coffee.
tell you, it still comes out regularly on Fridays.
Excellent.
And I like to use a lot of sports analogies. Try not to use cricket too much, although I work for a company with a big Indian population, and so my cricket analogies tend to work better than they did perhaps
Okay.
at CA in Japan or even at Proof Point in EMEA. But what Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum have done over the last year, transforming the England Test team. I mean, that is, I try and learn from that all the time. So cricket's still, I still have that view that cricket is life, the rest is mere detail. Reading Football Club, we probably shouldn't spend too much time talking about Reading, given the fact
No, I did a little research before this call, and so perhaps we should skim over Reading right now. Yeah.
League One. The great thing about being a Reading Football Club fan is you have, just as well actually, but you have no expectations whatsoever, and anyone can turn up and watch Reading and throw vitriolic insults at the fans, and we'll say, yes, you're right, we're not very good.
Well, I realised how bad and grim it got for Reading when I realised I'm a Pompey fan, that you're in the same division as us. It was like,
there you
blimey,
go.
what's going on with Reading? But no, that's
Well,
fine.
unfortunately, we got relegated because of financial misdemeanors. Ultimately,
I saw that.
We got docked 6 points, and we would just have survived if those 6 points had still been with us. But from the halcyon days of 2005-6, when we got promoted to the Premiership, and we had 2 seasons in the Premiership, and then we got relegated and then got promoted again.
Yeah.
We had 3 seasons in the Premiership that were remarkable, and I was at the time a very regular attendee. I still have a season ticket. I'm wondering whether to renew it now we're in League One.
Well,
Probably
I've just
not, to be honest.
I just renewed my, or actually for the first time, bought a Woking FC season ticket.
Okay.
Only because they're a local team for me, and they've so nearly made it into Football League last year at the end of last season. So, but they need support, and it's good fun. So, look, just finishing up now, Martin. So, just a few
sure.
other questions for you. Can anyone be a great leader? Do you think?
I think with the right, again, I think it's a mindset. I really do. I think, as I'm talking to people, mentoring people who want to go into management, particularly salespeople, I tend to say, okay, there are 3 things to remember. The first is, as you go from a leader, from an individual contributor to leader, you shift from selfish to selfless. You've got to put yourself last as a leader, whereas a sales rep is fundamentally paid to be selfish. So that's the first, the mindset thing. The second is, all the philosophy similar to the first, leaders eat last. I always say, the leader, you've got to be first into battle and last in retreat. And it's tough because you've got to lead by example. And the third is, first of all, you'll probably make less money than you did as an individual contributor. But more to the point, if you're going to be successful, you've got to hire people who are really, really good. And managing really good people is challenging.
Yeah.
So I always counsel people, whatever evolution in their career, I want to go to management, to understand what it takes. Because it's a huge responsibility, it's hard work, but it's incredibly fulfilling if you're lucky enough to work with great people. And that's probably the key to success, which is, to make sure that the team with whom you're working are as good as they can be.
This is what I've been dying to ask you, right? Best advice, quote, or analogy. You've already given me several here. I already use yours, and you can't use always tell the truth because it's easier to remember what you said.
Love
that.
Yeah,
love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, I can tell you my favorite sales story is
okay.
And forgive me if it takes a little bit of time to tell. I'll try and be very quick. We have a customer in the US. I was brought in by the sales manager there, and it was a 45-minute meeting. He'd used my title to get to the VPIT, and this is a cruise line company, and the 45-minute meeting turned into 2.5 hours as this VPIT, an American, and I realized we had a shared passion for Monty Python. And as the sales manager said, he sat there for 2.5 hours just watching us quote Monty Python at each other. That enabled us to bond. And as a result, when I needed to ask for the deal, I could, because we had that relationship. But I told that story, actually. I was lucky enough to go to a very intimate dinner with John Cleese. There were only about 15 of us.
Wow. Okay.
And I told that story to John when he was signing his book. And he laughed. He said, "Oh, I'm really glad." And he wrote in the sort of the book dedication, "Dear Martin, do I get a cut?" So
excellent.
I'm still good friends with the customer. They're a very successful customer. They're expanding the relationship. And he was kind enough to invite my wife and me to attend the inauguration of their flagship cruise ship, etc. So ultimately, I tell you that because it comes down to this, which is that old adage: people buy from people. It's true. The other thing that you probably haven't heard my saying this so much. I think this is relatively new, but this is my favorite line of all, almost, which is customers buy for their reasons, not for ours. Meaning, it's not just about the technology. The technology is almost table stakes. It's about how you position the technology to deliver customer outcomes better than your competition, and how you build that trusted relationship. So when the customer's ultimately got to make a decision between you and the other vendor, that they see that you've painted a picture of the future that's most compelling, and they like you.
Absolutely have not disappointed me, Martin, with your response to that question. So thank you very much. I love it.
Yeah.
So normally I'd say to people now at the end, saying, who would you like to have on the show? Who would you like me to interview? Because you've had a lot of executive experience, I'd like you to think about who you can hook me up with to get on this show, because you will know some senior people. It'll be interesting. So any idea who you might think would be good for the show?
I've got a great recommendation for you. She's a fantastic leader. She's a really good friend. She is currently the Northern Europe VP for VMware, so running
Okay.
a billion-dollar business.
Yeah.
So I will do an introduction. You send me a link to this, I'll do an introduction. She can take a look at it. She's fantastic.
Perfect. Thank you. Martin, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, Paul. It's great to reconnect.
Thank you.